Good morning, everyone. It's great to see everybody here early in the morning and such a diverse group. I'd like to tell you something about the Conservation Leadership Partnership. This is a new organization. This is the very first roundtable that we have hosted. It brings together a group of people who come from a conservative and libertarian perspective and who care about the environment. People who, like me, are searching for ways to marry the American concepts of individual responsibility, limited government, free enterprise, innovation, with the idea of protecting the environment. There are a great many possibilities for doing those things. And we have set out on a mission across the country to explore for good ideas.
We know that in this society, in this economically constrained environment where we all enjoy turning on the light switch in the morning and having electricity, when we turn on the water faucet and water comes out, and when we go to the store and there's abundant, wholesome, cost-effective food on the shelves, we know that those things just don't happen of their own accord, right? That they have to happen and continue the way they do currently. But there's thought that goes into that. There are business benefits that keeping working lands and working hands is that economic benefit that coincides with conservation. Because we've done conservation a certain way throughout history, and even though it's been successful, doesn't mean that's the same way that we can do it moving forward.
The other reason some people, and particularly in this room, may know about us is because of this approach that we follow for conservation. And I want to just point out that this is an approach that we think a lot of good folks are doing around the country. We happen to be sort of called out, if you will, to be represented as a model, but this is not about the Blackfoot Challenge. It's about this approach to community-based conservation. Because we've had pretty significant success in terms of maintaining access to working lands, and I'm primarily going to emphasize that these conserved lands, we feel like, continue to have the ability to produce those kinds of goods and services that Terry was talking about. We also realize that this protection work, this conservation, this restoration work has done a lot for a lot of other people downstream. And so we're trying to stave off the idea of regulation. We're doing a pretty good job of keeping clean water flowing into the Columbia River Basin. And with voluntary incentives, we hope to continue to do that.
So I think one of the reasons the agencies might be reluctant to embrace creative opportunities is that constant threat of litigation. And with folks like this coming together, the opportunity to speak with one voice to say, look, that's an abuse. This is not good conservation. It's actually hindering conservation. That could be an amazing opportunity.
So I heard Gary and Terry and then some of you in this conversation say two words. One is, by golly, we need flexibility. I also heard some reference to, by golly, we need certainty. Now, when you think about those governing characteristics, they're a little bit in tension. That is, certainty and flexibility may perhaps be a little bit at odds with one another.
For starters, Lynn, your point is right. The two are in tension with each other, but it's a creative tension because you're going to need both in the system. But what I would say is this: you could start by eliminating those rules that don't add to the value at the end of the line. So what I mean by that is, you have rules related to NEPA, which people would agree don't really contribute to the bottom line process. And so, you could move the balance over between certainty and flexibility in that manner by giving the decision makers on the ground greater flexibility. There are ways to do it, but you can start by eliminating those things that a consensus group of good-minded, fair-minded people would agree aren't really contributing to the value, and it's particularly important in a budget-constrained environment.
If we're going to conserve X or perform X, we need to make sure it gets done. And that's from a landowner's perspective. That accountability needs to be there. But the accountability that exists in the regulation side of things is that if I'm going to perform at that level and provide guarantees and proof that I did that, what's the quid pro quo? There needs to be accountability in the regulation. It gives me an assurance that what I did counted for something. So I often paraphrase things is if you want me to go to Steamboat, Lynn, and you want me to be there at a certain time, I'll do that. Just don't tell me how to get there. I may go this way or I may go that way, but I'll get there. I'll get there in the condition you want me to get there. And I'll be accountable for that. But you also need to be there when I'm there.
And what I've discovered is that government agencies need something to embrace to allow them to experiment. And if it comes out of academia, not out of corporations or the private sector, or even out of government, it gives them an ability to attempt to embrace this.
And as many of you know, I am the advocate for looking at demand. And I think for the emerging markets to start first, the ranchers, the suppliers of environmental markets, the actual products need to be chasing the few people who want to pay for them. So instead of us putting out a lot of products on the market that the conservation organizations want to see, that the farmers and ranchers want to sell, I think we go to the corporations that are going to be in business for a long time, and say, how do we help you solve your problems? And I think
From the oil and gas perspective, what we're looking at is, I mean, we're seeing this also with the lesser prairie chicken and some of the other things we've been working on, is as long as we can know that what the outcome is for all the parties are a win, then I think we can definitely work through all of these issues. I mean, I guess from a standpoint of the values, we all have those same values in this room. There's sometimes when you walk into a room and unfortunately they don't believe your values, or they don't believe you believe your values. That's where we find our conflict.
But then the last thing I heard that we really need is sustainability. If we can achieve all those things, how do we make these sustainable efforts? How do we equate these to some sort of policy initiative that sets about a fair process for all parties involved and yet really starts this dialogue down a positive path, and that conservative interests and environmental interests can actually sit at the same table and come up with some key concepts that we can all be proud of, and that we can help take this dialogue that has gotten so controversial and so partisan and so bitter and turn it back into the positive, proactive topics that we need to be addressing today.
Okay.